Members, Senate will come to order. Senator Hughes, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 2660.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time House Bill 2660 comes to us from Representative Oliverson over in the House. Important law that's based on a horrible situation that occurred with a man named Timothy Perez, reported missing here in Austin by the Austin Police Department. A few days later, up in Round Rock, he had an encounter with the police, but the police there did not know he was a missing person, didn't know he was in any danger, and so he was, after that encounter, was released and then not detained, and later he was found and he had died. And so, again, this is not the fault of a police department. They do heroic work. Because the systems in place, neighboring jurisdictions were not informed of his status as a missing person. And so this bill will require, in a situation like that neighboring jurisdictions be informed so that if there's an encounter with law enforcement with the missing person, the officers are aware and they can act accordingly and do the job which they want to do, which they're trained to do. That's what the bill does. Should the Senate see fit to suspend and bring the bill up, Senator Hancock has an amendment that addresses a similar and a tragic situation that was from his district he was involved in. Important matters to protect public safety, and I move suspension of the regular order of business.
Members, Senator Hughes moves suspension of the regular order of business, House Bill 2660. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rule is suspended. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2660. Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 2660 relating to the duties of a law enforcement agency regarding missing children and missing persons.
Members, there is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Hancock.
Senator Hancock on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment adds the Missing Child Act, Senate Bill 2429 that we passed unanimously on April 17th, and is a response to a kidnapping turned tragic case in the district that highlighted the need for more clarity. The individual 15-year-old girl was taken or left and went to the restroom at a Maverick game, did not come back. 10 days later, the father was told to report it back to his home city because of some situations in statute, and found her 10 days later in a hotel room in Oklahoma City. And so what we're trying to do is add some boots and suspenders by adding Senate Bill 2429, and Senator Hughes was kind enough to allow that, and so I believe it's acceptable to the author.
Senator Hughes on the amendment.
I thank Senator Hancock for the excellent amendment. It's acceptable to the author, and I hope it'll go on.
Members, Senator Hancock moves adoption. Floor amendment number 1 is acceptable to Senator Hughes. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, floor amendment number 1 is adopted. Senator Hughes, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move passage to third reading.
Members, Senator Hughes moves passage to third reading. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, bill is passed to third reading. Senator Hughes, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
That is my motion.
Members, Senator Hughes moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Burgo,
30 ayes and 1 nay. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage HB 2660. Secretary will read the caption.
HB 2660 relating to the duties of law enforcement agency regarding missing children and missing persons.
Senator Hughes, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. With thanks to Representative Oliverson, Senator Hancock, members of the Senate and the House, this bill will allow and enable our law enforcement to do their job to help with public safety. And so I move final passage, House Bill 2660.
Members, Senator Hughes moves final passage, HB 2660. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Burgo,
There being 30 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Middleton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider House Bill 1631.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move suspension of the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider House Bill 1631. This bill will treat Election Day poll watchers and early voting and central count station watchers the same. If passed, it will give all poll watchers the same come-and-go privileges while they perform their duties. Current law requires an Election Day poll watcher to serve a minimum of 5 continuous hours before they can leave and return to the polling place. However, we do not place this 5 continuous hour requirement on poll watchers who serve during the 2 weeks of early voting or poll watchers who are observing the ballot board or central count. This places an undue burden on Election Day watchers who need to use the restroom, make a phone call, or take a break. And we've often heard that election judges or poll watchers in training that quick restroom breaks have not been allowed. So that's why it's important to repeal this impracticable 5-hour rule that we place on our Election Day workers. And with that, I move suspension.
Member Senator Middleton moves suspension of the regular order of business, House Bill 1631. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rule is suspended. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 1631. Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 1631 relating to hours of services by an election watcher.
Senator Middleton, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move passage to third reading.
Member Senator Middleton moves passage to third reading. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, bill is passed to third reading. Senator Middleton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Move suspension.
Member Senator Middleton moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Borgo Blanco.
There being 30 ayes and 1 nay, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage HB 1631. Secretary will read the caption.
HB 1631 relating to hours of service by an election watcher.
Senator Middleton, you recognized for a motion.
Move final passage.
Member Senator Middleton moves final passage HB 1631. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Borgo
Being
Blanco.
30 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Middleton.
Thank you.
Senator Paxton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 2800.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move to suspend the regular order of business and take up and consider House Bill 2800. County election boards are established in each county for the general election for state and county officers, a special election for an officer regularly elected at the general election, and any other election ordered by a county authority or held at county expense. Currently, the Secretary of State recommends that county election board meetings should be held no later than the 36th day before a general election due to posting requirements, but they can be held as early as July. In some counties, there are no county election board meetings even held, while in other, the meetings are held by phone or email. House Bill 2800 increases transparency by requiring counties with a website to post a notice of the meeting 48 hours before each meeting, and mandates that a county election board meeting be held in person and open to the public. Members, I'll be laying out a floor amendment to return this bill to the original filed bill version in the House. I move to suspend.
Members, Senator Paxton moves suspension of the regular order of business, House Bill 2800. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rule is suspended. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2800. Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 2800 relating to meetings of a county election board.
Members, there is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Paxton.
Senator Paxton on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. This is the amendment that returns the bill to the House author's original intent for in-person open meetings of the county election boards. I move adoption of the amendment.
Members, Senator Paxton moves adoption. Floor amendment number 1. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Paxton, you recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to third reading.
Members, Senator Paxton moves passage to third reading. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, bill is passed to third reading. Senator Paxton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
That's my motion, Mr.
Members,
President.
Senator Paxton moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Borgo Blanco.
31 ayes and no nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage HB 2800. Secretary will read the caption.
HB 2800 relating to meetings of a county election board.
Senator Paxton, you recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Member Senator Paxton moves final passage. HB 2800. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bergeron, Blanco.
31 ayes and no nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Johnson, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business. Take and consider House Bill 5195.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, members, I move to suspend the regular order of business and take up to consider House Bill 5195. 5195 creates minimum standards of care for juvenile detainees awaiting adult adjudication. Basically, we have kids that are in our juvenile detention facilities. Those who are awaiting to be tried as adults currently, because of a loophole in state law, are not treated the same as kids who are there who are not awaiting trial as adults. We're talking about mental health screenings, treatment for substance abuse disorders, and education. This bill simply makes sure that the kids who are in the same facility are treated the same way while they're awaiting adjudication as adults. Members, I move to suspend the regular order of business.
Members, Senator Johnson moves suspension of the regular order of business, House Bill 5195. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rule is suspended. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 5195. Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 5195, relating to the services provided to certain children detained in a juvenile detention facility.
Senator Johnson, you're recognized for a motion.
I move passage to third reading.
Members, Senator Johnson moves passage to third reading. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, bill is passed to third reading. Senator Johnson, recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved.
Members, Senator Johnson moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell,
Being
Blanco.
29 ayes and 2 nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage HB 5195. Secretary will read the caption.
HB 5195, relating to services provided to certain children detained in a juvenile detention facility.
Senator Johnson, you're recognized for a motion.
I move final passage on House Bill 5195.
Members, Senator Johnson moves final passage HB 5195. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell,
Being
Blanco.
29 ayes and 2 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Birdwell is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 2291.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business, take up and consider House Bill 2291. Members, under current statute, there are various places around the state where individuals like law enforcement may or may not carry a firearm. However, under Penal Code 46.15, there's a list of individuals and occupations that would allow for the carrying of a firearm if the person has a license to carry. This list includes active and retired peace officers, corrections and parole officers, and active judicial officials. This bill simply seeks to add retired judicial officials to that list of exempted occupations when that retired judge or justice holds a license to carry. Retired peace officers are granted this exemption because they may have an enhanced safety risk resulting from the personal contact with various perpetrators or suspects from throughout their career. The same can be said for our retired judicial officials, and this bill seeks to offer them that exemption as well. I move suspension, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves suspension of the regular order of business on House Bill 2291. Is there objection? Hearing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2291. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 2291, relating to the carrying or possession of a handgun by certain retired judges and justices.
Senator Birdwell recognized for a motion.
Move passage to third reading, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves passes third reading. Is there objection? Hearing none, bill is passed to third reading. Senator Birdwell, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary, call the roll.
Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton.
27 ayes and 4 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading final passage of House Bill 2291. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 2291, relating to the carrying or possession of a handgun by certain retired justices and judges.
Senator Birdwell recognized for a motion.
Move final passage, Mr. President.
Senator Birdwell moves final passage of House Bill 2291. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton.
27 ayes and 4 nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations.
President and members.
Senator Betancourt, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 2879.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 2879 prevents Texas contractors who bid on perform work at local Texas construction projects from being forced to litigate any issue arising on the job. In foreign jurisdictions. Representative Oliverson filed this bill after hearing concerns from industry leaders and constituents regarding predatory contracting practices of large out-of-state contractors on construction projects located in Texas. The bill will protect the rights of contractors by requiring disputes to be heard in Texas courts, protecting them from biased and unfair legal systems. House Bill 2879 prevents general contractors from unfairly forcing Texas contractors to go and litigate in foreign jurisdictions. With that, Mr. President, I move to suspend the regular order of business and take up and consider House Bill 2879. We'll have one clarifying amendment.
Senator West, for what purpose?
I was trying to understand exactly what he was saying. He was talking so low, I couldn't understand a word he was saying. Yeah, about this particular bill. He was very low. So something must be going on. He was mumbling over there. And so what does this bill do as it relates to...
Senator West, basically what we've got is it basically protects the right of contractors from requiring disputes to be heard in Texas courts. Right now, they're basically being forced to go to out of jurisdiction, literally out of the United States, to hear disputes. So we're giving them an avenue to be able to have a U.S. court make a U.S. decision.
Okay, so are we saying that the contracts... Can you hear me over there?
Sure.
You sure?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Are we saying then that all of the contracts, as a matter of law, have to be in the state of Texas, or there needs to be a provision in the contract that states that venue is in the state of Texas?
Well, we have a law that allows them to change their contracts to say the venue for disputes will be the state of Texas.
Okay, and so this particular bill allows them to change that? That's something they already can do. So I'm trying to understand what this bill does that's not currently in the law.
Well, at least Representative Oliverson, believes that the current venue provision unfairly raises the cost barriers for Texas contractors to defend themselves or to seek redress for wrongs committed against them. The bill will encourage, in his opinion, economic growth from that standpoint, that they'll be in a more stable legal environment. The only thing I can say that there must be some type of issue with the venue selection process at this time, Senator West, for the bill to have been filed and passed.
Okay, and so this bill favors Texas businesses?
Yes, for allowing them to have a Texas venue for dispute, finalization.
Okay, and you're sure about that?
I am as sure as I could tell by reading the bill and looking at the bill summary.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator West.
Senator Betancourt moves suspension of the regular order of business on House Bill 2879. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2879. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 2879, relating to venue and certain actions involving a contract for an improvement to real property.
There is an amendment. Senator Betancourt, your amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Betancourt.
Senator Betancourt, the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the technically clarifying amendment brought by the governor's office to ensure the bill only applies to improvements in real property in this state. Move adoption of floor amendment number 1.
Senator Betancourt moves adoption of the amendment. Senator West, for what purpose? Senator Betancourt moves adoption of the amendment. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Betancourt, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move passage to third reading for House Bill 2879.
Senator Betancourt moves passage to third reading. Is there objection? Hearing none, bill is passed to third reading. Senator Betancourt, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day
rule. So moved, Mr. President.
Senator Betancourt moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
31 ayes and no nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading final passage of House Bill 2879. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 2879, relating to venue and certain actions involving a contract for an improvement to real property.
Senator Betancourt, you recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage of House Bill 2879.
Senator Betancourt moves final passage of House Bill 2879. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
31 ayes and no nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Whitmire.
Yes, sir.
You're recognized. Suspend the regular order of business, House Bill 2897.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business, take up and consider House Bill 2897. House Bill 2897 harmonizes statutes to clarify to which address a business can mail a demand letter after a customer has paid with a hot check. I so move, Mr. President. I move suspension, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Rules suspended. The rules suspended. House Bill 2897, second reading. Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 2897, relating to the prosecution of the offense of theft of service.
You're recognized on passage to third
I so move.
reading. Any objection? Hearing none. The bill passes to third reading. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I so move.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
31 ayes, no nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out third reading, final passage. House Bill 2897. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 2897, relating to the prosecution of the offense of theft of service.
You're recognized on final.
I so move.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes, no nays. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Whitmire, suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 4528.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to suspend Senate regular order of business to take up and consider House Bill 4528. Current law requires DPS when they pull you over, and they're going to take you, and local police too, they confiscate your driver's license who are refused or failed an intoxication test. DPS now will be instead electronically suspending your driver's license on the scene. It allows them to.
I can't hear you, Senator. If you just speak a little louder. And members, can we have some order behind the rail and in front of the rail? We can't
4528 modernizes current laws so that rather than having local police confiscate and keep track of confiscated license from drivers who refused or failed an intoxication test, DPS will instead electronically suspend the driver's license. I so move.
Thank you. Any objection? Hearing none. Rule suspended. Chair lays out second reading House Bill 4528. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 4528, relating to the requirement that a peace officer take possession of a person's driver's license following the person's failure to pass or refusal to consent to a test for intoxication.
You recognize passage to third reading.
I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none. Bill passes to third reading. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I so move.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes, no nays. Rule suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. House Bill 4528. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 4528, relating to the requirement that a peace officer take possession of a person's driver's license following the person's failure to pass or refusal to consent to a test for intoxication.
You are recognized upon the passage.
Move, Mr. President.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
31 ayes, no nays. The bill is always passed. How come you get all the easy ones?
Thank you.
Senator Lamantia, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business. On House Bill 2026, it's getting loud again, members. It's getting loud on the floor. There are lots of people on the floor, and there's just more noise.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up House Bill 2026. This was laid out the other day, and it updates the Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program. Yes, Senator Sparks' turn.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
27 ayes, 4 nays. Rules are suspended. Chair now, this is a third reading bill. Chair now lays out on third reading final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President, but there is an amendment.
1 second, Secretary. Read the caption.
House Bill 2026 relating to the Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program.
Following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 1 by Lamantia.
Your amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment ensures that the Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program remains exclusive to colleges in our state and that Texas residents receive preferential treatment in the application process. Mr. President, I move adoption of the floor amendment.
Any objection? Hearing none. The amendment is adopted. You're now recognized on final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Secretary will call the roll when ready.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
27 ayes, 4 nays. Bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members.
Senator Colcourse, for what purpose?
For an announcement.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Senate members and to those watching, I just wanted to report that Glenn College just won their super regionals and are headed to the JUCO World Series. And super excited for Jake Colcourse and all the teammates. And fun fact, that Weatherford won their regional, and so we have 2 community colleges from the state of Texas going to the JUCO World Series in Grand Junction, Colorado next weekend. Great thing for Texas. We're the only state, of course, that has 2 teams going to
Fantastic.
the JUCO World Series.
Fantastic.
So, go Bucks.
Senator Nichols, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business, House Bill 627.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 627. This bill will allow the surviving spouse of a person who is posthumous recipient of either the Star of Texas Award or the Purple Heart awarded be entitled to specialty plates for that award. For those of you who may not know, the Star of Texas Award is given the emergency medical first responders, firefighters, peace officers who are seriously injured or killed in the line of duty, private citizens who are injured or killed in aiding a police officer, firefighter, or emergency medical responders. With that, I move to suspend the regular order of business.
Any objection? Hearing none. Rules suspended. Chair lays out second reading House Bill 627. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 627, relating to the issuance of specialty license plates to the surviving spouse of a posthumous recipient of certain awards.
You recognize on passage to third reading.
Move passage to third reading of House Bill 627.
Any objection? Hearing none. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional three-day rule.
I so move.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt,
31 ayes, no nays. Rule suspended. Chair lays out third reading, final passage. House Bill 627. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 627, relating to the issuance of specialty license plates to the surviving spouse of a posthumous recipient of certain awards.
You're recognized on final.
I move final passage of House Bill 627.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt,
31 ayes, no nays. The bill is finally passed. Thank you. Welcome to those of you visiting in the gallery. Good to have you with us. Senator Nichols, once again, recognized to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 628.
I move to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 628. Members, this bill amends the Transportation Code to require the DMV to issue specialty plates to honor law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. Fees for this issuance of plates will be used to provide financial assistance to the surviving family members of fallen peace officers killed in the line of duty. With that, I move suspension of the regular order of business.
Any objection? Hearing none. The rules suspended. Chair lays out second reading House Bill 628. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 628, relating to the issuance of specialty license plates to honor fallen law enforcement officers.
You recognize passage third reading.
I move passage third reading.
Any objection? Hearing none. Bill passed the third reading. You recognize to suspend the constitutional three-day rule.
I so move.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt,
31 ayes, no nays. Rules suspended. Chair lays out third reading, final passage. House Bill 628. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 628, relating to issuance of specialty license plates to honor fallen law enforcement officers.
You recognize on final passage.
I move final passage of House Bill 628.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Blanco.
31 ayes, no nays. The bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Creighton, you're recognized to suspend the Constitution. Recognized to suspend the regular order of business. House Bill 2499.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, House Bill 2499 designates June 28th as the United States Special Forces Day in the state of Texas, honoring the brave men and women who comprise an elite fighting force for good across the globe who chose to endure the rigors of intense training to serve our nation. This date was chosen to commemorate the lives lost in heroic rescue efforts during Operation Red Wings on June 28th of 2005. Operation Red Wings was a military operation in Afghanistan where a four-man SEAL team was sent on a reconnaissance mission to locate a high-value target. The mission was compromised and the team found themselves in a fierce firefight with insurgents. Despite being heavily outnumbered and wounded, the team continued to fight. Team leader Michael Murphy risked his own life to call for help, ultimately sacrificing himself in the valiant effort to save his team. HB 2499 seeks to honor and show gratitude for the sacrifices of our U.S. Special Forces, whose proud traditions and feared reputation are worth our respect and acknowledgement. Mr. President, I move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider HB 2499.
Any objection? Hearing none. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2499. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 2499, relating designating June 28 as Special Forces Day.
You're recognized on passage to third reading.
Mr. President, move passage to third reading.
Any objection? Hearing none. Bill passes to third reading. You're recognized by the constitutional three-day rule. You're recognized by the
Mr.
constitutional
President, move to suspend the three-day rule.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
31 ayes, no nays. Rule suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. House Bill 2499. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 2499, relating to designating June 28 as Special Forces Day.
You're recognized on final passage.
Move final passage of House Bill 2499.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bergler.
31 ayes, no nays. The bill is finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Swertner, can the two of you move out of my line of sight with Senator Zaffirini? Thank you. Just shoo them away there, Senator Zaffirini. Shoo. Senator Zaffirini, you recognize suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for House Bill 54.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business in order to take up and consider at this time the committee substitute for House Bill 54 by Representative Sinfronia Thompson. It relates to the personal needs allowance for certain Medicaid recipients who are residents of long-term care facilities. Members, this bill generally would change the monthly Medicaid allowance for those either disabled or at least 65 years old from $60 to $75. It's a rate that hasn't been raised since 2005. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Any objection? Hearing none. Will suspend Chair lays on second reading committee substitute for House Bill 54. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute House Bill 54, relating to personal needs allowance for certain Medicaid recipients who are residents of long-term care facilities.
You recognize on passage third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to third reading.
Any objection? Hearing none. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional three-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. So moved.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Berg.
27 ayes, 4 nays. Rule suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for House Bill 54. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute House Bill 54, relating to personal needs allowance for certain Medicaid recipients who are residents of long-term care facilities.
You recognize on final.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Berg.
27 ayes, 4 nays. Bill's finally passed. Thank you. How many is that?
More than 30. Thank you, Mr. President.
I mean,
members.
Do you have a certain amount of bills you have to get done by next Wednesday to hit your 100 mark?
Too many. Too many.
You're still probably the leader of the pack.
Well, I keep trying. Thank you. It's what happens when your last name begins with a Z.
I have a grandson. His name starts with a Z. Senator Creighton, you recognize to suspend the regular order of business, House Bill 5394.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, the Westwood Magnolia Parkway Improvement District is a valuable asset to my constituents in Montgomery County. It was formed in 2003 to support infrastructure and public safety projects. The district is 1,840 acres. This legislation expands the district an additional 1,150 acres near a major road construction project, and the district's managing with the support of Montgomery County. In addition to the expansion, this legislation provides the district the ability to enter into strategic partnership agreements and provides a means of seating a director to the board. Mr. President, I move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider House Bill 5394.
Any objection? Hearing none, the rule suspended. Chair lays out second reading House Bill 5394. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 5394, relating the powers, duties, territory, and governance of the Westwood Magnolia Parkway Improvement District.
You recognize passage third reading.
Mr. President, I move passage to third reading for House Bill 5394.
Any objection? Hearing none, bill passed to third reading. You recognize to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule. Couldn't get that out.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move suspension.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
29 ayes, 2 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. House Bill 5394. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 5394, relating to the powers, duties, territory, and governance of the Westwood Magnolia Parkway Improvement District.
You're recognized on final passage.
Move final passage, House Bill 5394.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
29 ayes and 2 nays. The bill is finally passed. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Parker, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 3104.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider House Bill 3104 relating to the temporary exemption of certain tangible personal property related to certain connected data center projects from sales and use taxes. House Bill 3104 modernizes a 2015 statute providing an exemption from sales and use exemption for certain tangible personal property related to Texas large data centers with at least 250,000 square feet of space built on a single parcel of land or contiguous parcels of land with an investment of $500 million or more. Newer data centers are built today using multiple fiber-connected buildings operating as one data center project, but built on non-contiguous parcels of land. This multi-building data center project helps ensure data is not lost and IT services do not go down because of a weather event, terror attack, power outage, or the like. If one building loses power or is hit by a tornado, for example, the data is transferred to another building in the connected data center project to ensure reliability. Members, HB 3104 accomplishes two important goals. It helps protect Texans' data and encourages new economic development and investment in the state of Texas. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Senator Springer, what purpose?
To ask some questions to the author.
Do you yield?
I yield.
Senator Parker, help me understand on this a few questions. One is, under these, are they able to do cryptocurrency activities?
So one of the things I'm going to bring forward here in a minute, Senator, is I have an amendment that specifically will not allow cryptocurrency mining. So to take place at, both Senator Nichols and Senator Colcourse made that recommendation in finance this week. And so my amendment will in fact address that momentarily.
Okay, and also are ones who are able to get this incentive product, are they going to be able to get a 313 or a new version of 313s?
No, this would be specific to this data center incentive. If they get the data center incentive, I'm not advised that they'd have access to other opportunities. There are 12 of these existing facilities in the state of Texas, Senator, 12 today. And again, this is going forward, but what we're doing here is just modernizing the statute that's been in place since 2015.
And these are single tenant ones, correct?
These are single tenant. That's exactly right.
So, and so basically this is Google, Amazon, Facebook would probably be the big ones that everybody would think of?
Large companies, 250,000 plus square feet, and then again, an investment of a half a billion dollars or more.
But under those same parameters, it doesn't qualify for a lot of the Texas-based companies that do the exact same services, but they have multiple tenants in it, correct?
Correct. And again, this is all, in terms of the modernization, is all going forward. It's all prospective.
And I'm just trying to understand why we're favoring companies, out-of-state companies versus Texas companies.
Well, I don't think we're doing that, Senator. I don't think we're favoring out-of-state companies versus Texas companies. Any Texas company that wants to,
if they wanted to be a single source, you're correct.
If they want to build a facility like this, we have the opportunity.
But they do they're hosting data, and whether it's I own this server and I put it in somebody who runs it, or I go to somebody who has the server, it's the same thing, cost about the same. It's two different type of deals. They're both the same size models from square feet, same size of investments, but one's getting an investment and one's not is what I'm looking at from this, and it's what raises my concern on this.
No, Senator, my perspective once again is that any Texas company, any company that wants to bring this level of investment to Texas for a data center, these are very high-paying, high-quality jobs, and what we're doing is simply modernizing with this bill what we did back in 2015. We're enabling that 250,000 square feet or more to be connected with fiber and not necessarily next to one another, so to speak, or in the same under one roof. That's really what we're doing here. But again, my perspective is, Senator, that any Texas company, and I would love to see more Texas companies take advantage of this opportunity. This creates a tremendous economic drive, a huge innovation economy driver for Texas because we put in place these kind of data centers. I mean, the average jobs here are well over $100,000 a year, folks that are working in these type of data centers across the state.
But the problem is the model that says we're only going to incentivize for the exact same investment, exact same everything, other than I host it and I'm it, and I just rent it as the cloud, versus I allow it to say I will manage your servers that you buy. The same amount of great jobs, the same amount of great infrastructure, but we only give it to one component and not to the other component. And the other component today happens to be a lot more Texas companies, and could be out-of-state companies as well. But the big ones that are these single tenants tend to be the ones that aren't necessarily Texas companies. We'd love to see them be Texas companies, but that's the challenge, and I feel like we've left another group out that could benefit from that same perspective. But because we have this arbitrary rule that says it's got to be single source versus somebody who does exactly the same thing. So if I'm somebody who's going to source this and I want to do this model versus this model, one's advantaged over another.
Senator, what I would tell you is that I would love to work with you in the interim. Let's work on addressing the co-location type of scenario data centers. Let's see if we can do something for them as well next session. But this specifically, again, is just modernizing what's been in place since 2015. And Texas companies have the opportunity to participate just like any company would.
Well, and my understanding is those companies did come forward and tried to work and get on with it, and then at the last were sort of left out of the bill.
And my understanding, obviously, and looking at the situation, was obviously a financial decision was made in terms of the level of incentive that we're going to put out there with regard to the program. But
so what's the fiscal note on this bill?
Well, the fiscal note, there's really no fiscal note to the state. It'll really be at the local level where it will be borne.
Okay, so if there's no fiscal note to the state for doing this model, why would there be a fiscal note for doing the other model?
Again, I'm not going to get into arguing, those other types of models. Obviously, I think those are great businesses. They're very important to have co-location facilities as well. They're just not part of this piece of legislation here. Senator.
I'm just afraid that with this, we put Texas businesses at a disadvantage to out-of-state globals that are doing a different model. But I appreciate you answering my questions.
And I appreciate the conversation. Respectfully, I disagree. I think this is strong policy for Texas. I want to see more Texas companies participate, and let's continue to work together in the interim to allow more companies that want to have the co-location model and data centers be a part of this going forward.
Senator Parker, suspension of the regular order of business. Any objection? Hearing none. Bill passes, or the rule is suspended. Chair lays out the second reading, House Bill 3104. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 3104, relating to the temporary exemption of certain tangible personal property related to certain connected data center projects from sales and use taxes.
We have an amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Parker.
Senator Parker, you're recognized on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment is a perfecting amendment. This language was vetted by the Comptroller's Office. I appreciate very much Senator Colkhorst and Senator Nichols' concerns this week in finance with regard to cryptocurrency mining. We wanted to address that with this amendment. I also want to thank Chair Huffman and the other members of the Finance Committee for their leadership on this bill. This amendment restricts cryptocurrency mining and staking operations from applying for this large data center modernization bill. The language mirrors the existing prohibition on telecommunications services in the existing statute, and I move adoption.
Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. Sorry. Do you want to speak? I'm sorry, Senator Springer, I missed your light. What purpose?
To ask questions about the amendment.
Do you yield?
I yield.
Senator Parker, my understanding is the amendment bans the cryptocurrency on the new section that we're competing in, but these already have 2 other sections that we give the incentive is that they're not banned from the crypto, and it says primarily in crypto. So that's a 49% standard. Is that correct?
Well, again, what we're doing here is addressing the concern. This is the language, obviously, that we've vetted with the Comptroller's Office. You can see, obviously, what we're doing here specifically to addressing the problem of crypto mining. The issue is that they take a lot of, obviously, power from the grid. That's been the concern, that it could hurt or destabilize the grid. And as a result of that, Senator, we put this in place to make a prohibition going forward. So a company that wanted to come forward now and have the opportunity to participate in this program would be prohibited. And again, in the first place, these crypto miners, it would be extraordinarily rare that they would bring an investment of $500 million or more as well, Senator.
Okay, and so looking on page 2, here's where it has that chapter 313 is being added into it. But does it cover the former programs that they've entered into as well? But it also doesn't go forward if there's, because 313s are dead, and so basically there's no way they would do a 313 going forward. They're going to do a new version if we had one, and so they're not going to be permitted or banned from being able to do those.
Again, this right here is just really prospective going forward. So read the language.
And that's my problem is perspective going forward is there is no 313. So we reference something that's no longer available, but yet we may come up that I know that's been worked on. In fact, today was one. And so, would it qualify? So if House Bill 5 was to pass, would they be able to use House Bill 5 as well as this incentive? Because I don't see it banned in here.
We can talk about further clarification in that regard. At my assessment, they would not be able to.
All right, thank you.
Senator Nichols, what purpose?
I just asked a question.
Do you yield?
I yield.
Thank you. I remember in finance us talking about I had a concern, I think some of the others, to make sure that crypto miners were not using the advantage of being called a data center.
That's what we're doing here, Senator.
Okay, and so the Comptroller's Office was there. I'm sorry I don't remember the lady's name, but we asked her, could she work to help create an amendment to ensure that we are not doing crypto mining? So is this the actual amendment?
Yes, this is the actual amendment. The Comptroller's Office obviously reviewed it as well, and it specifically would block that concern that you and Senator Colkhorst had.
So this is the one the Comptroller's Office?
That's the one the Comptroller's Office, that's exactly what this is. Work with the Comptroller's Office. It puts the prohibition in place against any kind of crypto mining facility. For the reasons that we've discussed, Senator.
And it refers, the reference to virtual currency isn't a reference to the crypto miner.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Senator Colcourse.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the gentleman yield for a question about the amendment?
But mine tomorrow, it's no big deal.
Best way to land the plane then.
Yeah, but that's what I'm.
Senator Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had some discussion here about the amendment, and we want to continue to work on that with stakeholders. So we'll postpone this till tomorrow morning, time certain 11 a.m.
Any objection? Hearing none. Bill is postponed until tomorrow, 11 a.m.
Huh?
Senator Hughes, do you want to do this bill? Senator Hughes, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business. Committee substitute for House Bill 5180.
Thank you, Mr. President. And members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time House Bill 5180. Right now, there's a discrepancy between two conflicting Attorney General opinions on when certain election materials must be made available to the public. Many of us on the State Affairs and other committees learned about this, where there's an unusual quirk in the law, so that for a 2-year period, election materials, ballots, are not available for public inspection. And so House Bill 50, now when I would clarify this, our Attorney General currently released an opinion making this strong, but the previous AG opinion is still in conflict. And so House Bill 5180 will address this conflict by clarifying that cast vote records and images of voted ballots, if a county maintains such images, are to be available for public access the day after the final canvass of an election is completed. Also says the original physical voted ballots will be available for public inspections on the 61st day after the election. That first 60 days is the period, of course, to consider recounts, election contests. The clarification removes any doubt as to when the election records custodian must make these election materials available to the public. That's what the bill does. It's from Representative Wilson of Williamson, and I move suspension.
Senator Johnson, what purpose?
Questions of the author?
Do you yield?
I'll yield, of course.
First, I would like to thank Senator Hughes for delaying the discussion on this so that we could all be on the floor, or he and I could be on the floor at the same time. I do appreciate it. I also want to say that Senator Hughes' layout is accurate, that there is a conflict between prior Attorney General opinions. My understanding is actually our current Attorney General Paxton himself has 2 opinions on the subject, and his second opinion conflicts with his first opinion. But having reviewed the federal statute and multiple provisions of the state statute, I agree with you, it's unclear. As I read the statute, however, and I'm just an average lawyer, it does seem to me that Texas law would require preservation of original ballots for a 22-month period consistent with both state and federal law. The Attorney General, most recent Attorney General opinion says, no, that's not the case. They should be opened up for public inspection. What was it? Is it 60 days?
After the 60 days, 61st day, yes, sir.
Right. So let's start with just the first question of the practical matter of why we'd want to do that and what the effects would be, because you and I agree that the law is unclear, and we're now proposing to clear it up. So you and I and the rest of us on this floor are making a decision about election law that's going to affect everybody. So if this bill were to pass 61 days after the election, anybody who wants to could go get hold of the physical ballots. What will be the benefit of having basically any election vigilante being able to pick up a piece of paper and say, is that a black computer check mark in the middle of the page? What are we doing here?
Well, Senator, as I answer your question, I want to make sure we're clear. You talked about this bill, and then you contrasted that with preservation of the records. We have preservation of the records in either case. The records must be preserved. To be clear, no one's talking about destruction or removal or anything like that. But the public has a right to know if our elections are working right.
I'm sorry, the public? We couldn't hear you.
Oh, sure. The public has a right to know if the election process is working right, if our machines are working correctly, if they're being recorded and reported properly. So that's what this is about.
How are they going to decide that? When they look at a piece of paper, how are they going to have any clue as to whether the machines are working correctly?
Well, Senator, it's not just a piece of paper. As you know, sometimes there are images of voted ballots. Sometimes there are other records. To the extent those records exist, they should be available for the public, not to take them, not to mark them or deface them, but to inspect them.
Why?
Because the public, they're public documents. So, Senator, let me tell you that. Help me with this. Why 22 months? Why not 20 months? Why not 20 years?
To be honest, Senator Hughes, I don't know why they chose 22 instead of 24 or 20. But it is clear in statute under, I believe it's the Elections Code, section 66058, where they not only reference preserve for 22 months. And I take seriously your point that preserving doesn't necessarily mean preclude the public from having access. But if you read the rest of the section, preserve securely in a locked room, in a locked box, in a general custodian, and they're going to have the key, and the only thing that happens after 60 days is somebody else can have a key. I mean, it sounds like they're supposed to be secure, but again, I credit you for your bill is clear in that we're not going to interpret it the way Nathan Johnson's interpreting it. So that's a valid legislative exercise. I don't see the purpose of it, however, because I don't see how providing the public access to individual voting records, ballots which are de-identified, and they're de-identified under the law, is going to give the public any insight that has value into the fairness and effectiveness of our elections process. Because we already have recounts, we have audits, we have inspections, we have people who are trained to oversee these. Aren't we just encouraging electoral vigilantism here?
Well, Senator, I'll ask rhetorically if we're going to have this same discussion on your amendment. If so, this one is misplaced, but I'll answer your question. Are we saying then that we're the experts, the public should just trust us, don't worry about that, we'll take care of it? The period for challenging the election's over, recounts are over, the election is settled. Nothing done after the 61st day is going to change the results of the election. Why then should the public not have access to this information? The default should be for public access, sunshine being the best disinfectant.
There's a couple of answers. For one thing, this is going to create a tremendous burden on already burdened county electoral systems. It's more cost, it's more things to deal with. It does further a narrative that there's somehow something wrong with our voting systems. If it's not going to be possible for the public to ascertain the effectiveness of our voting systems by giving them access to these records, we're not actually helping the public at all. And as for are we supposed to be the experts, are they supposed to trust us? Certainly not trust us. We're legislators. But the election officials, the ones who take a sworn duty to count ballots accurately and administer elections accurately, yeah, I think there does need to be a certain level of trust, and we're encouraging a distrust. If it's a 30-point blowout, who cares who has access to the ballot box? If it's close, we do an audit, we do an inspection, we have a recount, we have a series of recounts. We already do all these things to make sure that our election systems are fair. And yet here we are saying, okay, general public, come sift through de-identified pieces of paper and see if you can figure out what's going on. I don't see that we're really doing something honest, that we're really saying honestly to the public, we're giving you more power to verify the security of our elections. I think we might be doing just the opposite by creating some sort of conspiracy theory as to a bunch of sneeze marks when the 627th person looks at the ballot.
Senator, I'm honestly surprised by your position. You're a very smart guy and you take thoughtful positions. I like being on the side of openness and sunshine and access, and I'll stand there. And that's all I got to say.
Okay. We agree in openness in government. I just don't believe this is a vehicle for openness in government, so I think we'll move on to the amendment process and finish our conversation.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Miles, what purpose?
Question to the author.
Do you yield?
Of course I'll yield.
Senator Hughes, in the same line of questioning that you just did with Johnson, Senator Johnson, I mean, there's transparency, and then there's craziness. So you're asking, and we all want transparency in our voting process, but correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm reading this right. HB 5180 applies to all elections, including special and primary elections?
I believe that's right. Yes, sir. That's the intent.
And will counties be allowed to adopt procedures for prioritizing and managing inspection requests? So anybody can come off of, all citizens now can come off and request to see the ballots from that cycle?
Just like it is in current law after 22 months. Just like it is today after 22 months.
For a fee
That's
of $50
how it is today.
For a fee of $50, Harris County and Dallas County is going to have to produce and remove all the personal information off of every ballot and then make available to whoever asked for within 6 days after canvass. Is that right?
Just like they have to today after 22 months. That's right. We're just moving that timetable up.
Senator Hughes, does that even sound reasonable to you?
Senator, I don't understand why we are in favor of keeping this from the public. I am genuinely perplexed. And I want to make sure people are clear about this. We are saying this information should not be released to the public. We're saying, just trust us. Don't look over here. Senator, I would be nervous if I was listening to this debate and people were opposed to showing this to the public. I'm genuinely confused by this.
I don't think we
this
should
is not a complicated bill.
I don't think this is the right solution to it, though, brother. I mean, for $50, we got to provide the ballots in Harris County and Dallas counties, huge counties. Not only do we have to provide the ballot, you've got to black out all the personal information on every ballot first.
Senator, the ballots don't have any names on them. Well, ballots don't have names on them.
I'm using your language to remove the
personal identifiable information. Yes, sir.
That's your language, and this is your bill, right?
Well, the name isn't on the ballot, as you know. You got the. You know how that works. The ballot that doesn't have your name on it.
I'm using your language.
It says identifiable information. Doesn't say name, but go ahead.
So remove all the personal information and then have these images of cast ballots, votes available within 6 days of the canvass.
That's right.
For a small fee of $50.
Right now they have to make them available after 22 months. This is getting rid of the 22-month delay.
And you think this is reasonable and doable?
Oh, I do. I do.
In Tyler, it might be reasonable and doable, but I can assure you in Dallas and Harris County, it's not going to be reasonable and doable.
Well, Senator, they have to do it today after the 22 months. They're required to make them public today after 22 months.
Don't you think we can come up with a better solution for transparency than this bill?
Well, Senator, honestly, no one can tell us why the 22-month delay was put in there. This came up in a hearing, and the Secretary of State's office said it was 22 months, and everybody kind of shook their head. No one knows why it was put there. And he doesn't know, no one's told us why it was put there.
You're an intelligent guy.
I'm sorry.
Just like you told Senator Johnson, you're an intelligent guy.
Yes, sir.
Does this seem like the reasonable solution to the problem?
Oh, it does. It does to me.
Maybe in Tyler, this may be reasonable. Small town Tyler. But in large counties like Harris and Dallas, this is really going to be unreasonable.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Betancourt, what purpose? Wrong light. Senator West, what purpose?
Question of the author.
Do you yield?
Of course I'll yield.
Senator, in terms of your bill, I'm on page, it's only one page anyway. Line 42. Let me know when you're with me.
Yes, sir, got it.
Okay, you say that the custodians shall adopt procedures to ensure the redaction of any personal identifiable information.
Yes, sir.
Are you concerned? I assume the custodian obviously would be the election clerk of the county?
Yes, sir, unless the county designates someone else. I believe that's right.
Are you concerned that we'll end up with different types of procedures as it relates to that? Should there be more uniformity in terms of redaction? Should that be something done at the Secretary of State's office in terms of what should be redacted as it relates to personal information?
Well, as you know, there are provisions like this throughout the code where we tell local jurisdictions to protect certain information. And as Senator Miles noted, large counties might have different processes than smaller counties. But I want to stress that under current law, this is all available 22 months after the election. So I want to be clear. I think our presumption should be openness, not hiding things.
Hold it. I'm not even going there with you. I'm asking you about the procedures.
Yes, sir. I understand.
All right, so I'm not going there. That's not even what I'm talking about. I'm asking about the adopting the procedures to ensure redaction. That's what I'm talking about. So
yes, sir.
You think it should be left at the county level, or there should be some uniformity in that?
Well, as you know, we have other laws about when documents are filed with the county clerk, with the district clerk, and we leave a lot of discretion to the counties to do that. So that was the intent when this bill was drafted.
Okay, so you believe it should be left to the counties to determine exactly the procedures for redaction?
I believe so, yes, sir. Given the different size of counties and number of records maintained and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Senator.
Senator Hughes, you are recognized. We were on suspension, right?
Mr. President, I move suspension.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, King, Colcourse, Lamontia, Menendez, Middleton, Miles, Nichols, Parker, Paxton, Terry, Fortner.
20 ayes, 11 nays. Rule suspended. Chair lays out on second reading. Committee substitute for House Bill 5180. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute House Bill 5180, relating to the public inspection of election records.
There is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Johnson.
Senator Johnson, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I ask the author of the bill another couple of questions as a predicate to the amendment?
I addressed you on the amendment, so you can lay out the amendment.
I'll lay out the amendment and the dialogue will ensue then.
If he chooses to engage, then.
Very well. Members, the amendment does the opposite of what Senator Hughes does, so I think it's unlikely that he's going to accept it. As mentioned in the layout, there are conflicting Attorney General opinions on this subject. One is that the ballots must be kept securely for 22 months in accordance with federal law and Texas state law. The other opinion is that actually, no, it doesn't have to be kept for 22 months. That places election officials potentially in an untenable position of having to comply with a new Texas law and violate both state and federal law, which is not a position I want to put our election officials in. So instead, my amendment would clarify that the prior interpretation by the Attorney General, before there was mass hysteria about alleged voter fraud, would be the consistent law of this state and consistent with federal law. So with that, I move adoption, and Senator Hughes, if you would indulge me, and that's your option not to. I'm trying to restore stability to the law and to prevent vigilantism and to prevent unnecessary burdens upon counties. If we're not to do this, I hope you'll tell me what is the problem you're trying to solve with this bill and how your bill is going to solve the problem, as distinct from mine, making things stable the way they have been. And Senator Hughes, this bill, as you know, this amendment, as you know, is simply an incorporation of Senate Bill 292, which I pre-filed to try to do, to resolve the same thing you're trying to resolve, essentially. We're just resolving it in opposite ways.
Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I understand the amendment. It goes to the discussion we had at the beginning of the bill, and I just want to stress, and with great respect and love for my colleagues, the presumption should be openness. The presumption should be public access. No one can tell us why this 22-month limitation was put in place. It needs to go, and respectfully, I'll be voting no on the amendment.
We have two other senators who want to speak. Senator Menendez, what purpose?
I had a question of the author of the amendment.
Do you yield?
I do. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you. Senator Johnson, as I read your amendment, if I'm not mistaken, you don't have a problem with the concept that's being presented. The issue is the 6 days, why does it need to be on after the 6th day if the bill came out of committee after 60th day? Is that what you're trying to do, is take it back to that 60th?
No, there's a longstanding state and federal law that the actual physical ballots themselves need to be preserved, not altered, not tampered with, that we don't have people coming in and interfering with the integrity of that physical representation of the election results, and they're kept in a locked vault for that reason.
Right.
They keep them for 22 months because that would make it all done right before the next election. Right. And I'm trying to clarify that has served us well, and I'm trying to understand why we would do anything else, because I imagine you're like me, you do think that you do believe in open records, you do believe in open access, right. But that's not what we mean, or we're not talking about openness when we are having people from the general public go into that locked box that for decades has been state and federal law to preserve those physical ballots. And now anybody can go look at them and presumably mess with them And that's messing with our elections. I think that destabilizes the process as well as imposing costs. So that's what my amendment is trying to do. It's simply trying to preserve the ballots in the form they were in. If there's questions over the election, we got 1,000 different ways we can resolve those things.
Thank you. Appreciate your amendment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks
Thank
for the
you, Mr.
question.
Senator Betancourt, what purpose?
Ask question of the author of the amendment.
Yes, I do.
Senator Johnson, I think you stated that you were curious as to why this bill is in existence, right?
Am indeed.
Right, because you don't know of a logical reason for this bill to be before the body.
Honestly, I think the reason to be think the reason for this bill is to make people more afraid of election fraud and kind of reinforce this narrative that has been peddled for the last 4 years. I don't think it really has any substance to it whatsoever, and I certainly don't think it serves any purpose whatsoever other than to destabilize confidence in our election systems and in each other.
If I gave you an example of a documented incident, you might be interested in it?
I'm sure I would be.
Okay.
I don't know that I'll be able to refute it eloquently because it's kind of fresh.
No, that's right. Well, the genesis of this bill actually occurs from Harris County. And no, shock again, okay? And this is Alan Vera. I think you remember Alan. Sadly, we lost him when he came up to testify and had massive heart attack and passed in the Capitol.
I don't. I'm sorry for his family.
No, it's we did do something very unique. We got the flag off the Capitol first time in 37 years and presented it to his wife, Colleen. They were working on what they thought was ballot fraud. And in 2018, they identified 300 applications in the Democratic primary for absentee ballots by mail. They went to the precinct results, and after 22 months, they found 300 applications, Senator Hughes, with the exact same voting pattern. Exactly 300 applications.
And who found this?
This is Colleen and Al Vera. Colleen is still alive. They are the ballot security team from Harris County on the Republican side. So they looked at this one area.
Which side?
And documented it, turned it into the district attorney.
Oh, you said they were the ballot security team for which side?
So they were for the Republican Party.
Okay.
They looked at this particular situation, and they found 300 ballot applications signed in the same handwriting. And then they looked in the specific precinct in the Democrat primary and found the 300 exact ballots with the exact same voting pattern. Now, they turned all that information over to the district attorney, but because of the 22-month period of time, by the time they could collect the information and get it, the 2-year statute of limitations had expired, but all that information is actually available at the district attorney's office in Harris County. So I wanted to bring out an exact example of why moving up the 22 months to 61 days makes a big difference, because if this was voter fraud, and by the way, I'm the only last voter registrar in the state that actually got a conviction for voter fraud.
It sounds kind of fishy, the story you've described.
Well, it's not fishy, sir, and I know it's factual, and it's documented at the Harris County District Attorney's Office.
Right, and do you think the Harris County DA would be unable to obtain access to ballots to verify?
No, the problem was by the time they got the information, that the Veras could turn the information around and get it to the district attorney. The 2-year timeline already passed.
I'm not trying to interrupt your flow, but I want to make sure we explore this. Are you saying that the DA could not have gotten those original ballots? That first, the DA needed the original ballots to determine what it needed to determine, and second, that they could not have obtained those ballots within the 22-month period?
No, because you know the answer to that question. The answer was they were unaware of this until after 22 months and after the Veras did this work, and then they turned that information over. By the time an investigation gets started, the 2-year statute of limitations already expired. Because remember, the Veras couldn't get access to the information for 22 months.
But I don't know about what happened.
I bring this up because you were completely puzzled about there was no example, and I'm giving you...
I'm still kind of puzzled. So
well,
how did this happen?
I'm not. because it's a documented example and exists in government at the DA's office in Harris County.
I'm having trouble just because I haven't heard the whole story, I guess, seeing the relevance of the story. Why did it take them more than 22 months to figure out what you're describing?
For exactly the reason why Senator Hughes is trying to pass the bill.
Because they couldn't see a bunch of blank or digital check marks on pieces of paper? Please.
Let me answer the question.
Yeah.
Why did it take that long? Because the records weren't available for 22
What
months.
records?
The voting records.
The ballots.
Yeah, the ballots.
The ballots. These guys would have gone in and found a bunch of 3 million de-identified pieces of paper with some black marks on them and figured out that they don't match up?
No, very simply, Senator. They detected a pattern. They looked at the specific precinct, the Democrat primary.
Right.
And they found 300 exact ballot matches.
Heard that part.
For 300 exact signed signature verification applications. But because the ballots, it took 22 months to even get access to it, they turned the information over to the district attorney's office, but it's too late to do anything about it. The point is this. It's simple. It's sunshine. What this bill is move up the 22 months to 61 days. Because these are all public information. Why? My question to you as the author of the amendment. Why do you want government to get in the way of the public having access to its own information? That's what this is. It's really simple.
I'll tell you
Instead of 22 months, it's now to be 61 months.
I'll tell you what, as a member of the public, as someone who votes, as someone who pays taxes, as somebody who has faith in county officials, I don't want every conspiracy theorist out there wrecking our election systems so that they can chase and figure out whether or not, I don't even know what this story is or why it took 2 years for them to have the hunch that they detected a vote. They were looking at voting patterns. I cannot see how my elections are any more secure if we facilitate this kind of vigilantism. It just doesn't seem more secure to me.
The pursuit of truth is not debunkingism. What gets measured gets fixed. This bill moves up by 20 months the access to what are public records. And as somebody that had to give out, at times, very high estimates of what it takes to redact public records, it's nonetheless public information. Now, the Veras, in this case, started looking at material after 22 months. It wasn't they were looking at the specific precinct, they were looking at a lot of material. And they happened to, however, find a pattern of what would appear to be a voter harvester who signed 300 applications, the same signature, and then they found 300 actual printed ballots, with the exact same voting pattern. Now, we will never know because it's unprovable, but the data and the information's available at Harris County District Attorney's Office.
Why won't we ever know?
Well, because there's never going to be a trial on it. The statute of limitations had run. So
it's still find out, though, right? You might not prosecute anybody. Well, we could know the answer, couldn't we?
No, you can't know the answer if you don't have an investigation. But
why can't we conduct an investigation? We had audits of 4 counties. In fact, I think you authored the audit bills, didn't you?
Right. And as somebody that authored the audit bill, this information would be available at the Secretary of State's office well before it would be available to the public. And that's another reason to support Senator Hughes' bill.
So do you not have faith that your audit bill is going to deliver us safe elections? Do you think we really need the general public going in and opening these ballot boxes that were supposed to be preserved?
No, because you're presupposing that public information is not public information. Because because this is fully redacted, secret ballots that can't be traced back to by any public inspection to the person who actually cast it. True or false?
I don't know what the question is.
And a ballot under inspection later be traced back directly to, with a redacted ballot, can it
certainly not supposed to be.
Can it possibly be traced back to the owner of the actual
It's certainly not supposed to be. I don't know the relevance of the question.
If the redaction is done correctly, that's my question.
I think by definition it would not be. If it's done correctly.
By definition it can't
I don't know why we're asking the question.
Well, I'm asking the question to you.
I mean, we have this bill that creates this systems probably as a practical logistical matter completely untenable, when you already know we can audit these elections? I'm not sure what you're worried about, and I surely don't see how this is going to help.
I will leave
but we're
you
going
with
in
this,
circles. And
Senator Johnson, that public information should be the public. We passed Senate Bill 1910 that basically allowed the litigation exemption to be canceled, so that that parties that need to get the information can get it. This is just the same thing. But thank you for your amendment. I'll be voting no.
You will, okay. Any other questions for the author of the amendment?
Senator Eckhart, for what purpose?
To ask a question of the author of the amendment.
Do you yield?
I do.
So really all you're trying to do is push it out to 61 days to give the actual professionals a chance to review all of the records and then provide those records, the images of those records, if they keep images. But otherwise keep the law the same with regard to the release of original ballots, correct?
Senator Eckert, I think you've stated it more clearly than anybody on the floor has so far, and I'm glad you raised the point. The inspections that are so critically important here are addressed in two ways. One is the access to the physical ballots, and that's what this entire argument has been about. But you point out that right above that, there is access to digital images of the ballots after 61 days, and my bill does make it 61 days instead of the day after, which as a practical matter, these counties need time to store the records, process the records, make them available. But the inspections that Senator Betancourt, Senator Hughes, everybody's talking about, the open access to these records, it's there. It's there in paragraph F of the bill, and I'm not deleting that paragraph through this amendment.
And that's what was confusing me about the debate. You are not preventing the inspection of the images of the records.
Correct.
You were merely putting it in a time frame appropriate for the professionals to put them in order, and also for the professionals to note any possible anomalies.
And they would still be open to the public, and I really appreciate you bringing that point up. They're still available to the public.
Thank you very much.
They just won't get sneezed on, or creased, or stained with coffee, or stolen, which could happen if people have physical access to the ballots. In fact, we may be compromising election integrity by allowing everybody to go in and play around in the ballot box.
Pawing through the original ballots would be problematic from a chain of custody standpoint, yes.
Thank you, Senator Eckert.
Senator Hughes on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And with respect to all of our colleagues, I will be voting no on the amendment.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock.
There being 19 nays and 12 yeas, the amendment fails. Senator Hughes, you're recognized for motion.
I move passage to third reading.
Senator Hughes moves passage to third reading. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes.
There being 20 yeas and 11 nays, the bill passes the third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Betancourt, you recognize to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 2138.
Thank you, Mr. President. Currently, nonprofit wildlife and agricultural organizations cannot sell charitable raffle tickets online to their members and supporters. House Bill 2138 seeks to change this by providing these organizations with an additional means to support conservation efforts and important habitat restoration projects by allowing only members and identified supporters of the organizations, not members of the general public, to purchase raffle tickets online. And I have an amendment from the Baptist General Convention of Texas to take after I move suspension of the regular order of business and take up and consider House Bill 2138.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
22
Campbell.
ayes, 9 nays. Rules suspended. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2138.
House Bill 2138 relating to the sale of charitable raffle tickets by certain nonprofit wildlife conservation associations.
Following amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Betancourt.
Your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. This agreed to floor amendment in committee brought to us by the Baptist General Convention of Texas. The amendment ensures that graphics or dynamic animation can be used to demonstrate an entry as a raffle or raffle drawing. I move adoption of floor amendment number 1.
Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. You're recognized on passage to third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to third reading of House Bill 2138.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, King, Colcourse, Lamantia, Menendez, Middleton, Miles, Nichols, Parker, Paxton, Perry, Schwartner, Sparks, Springer, West, Whitmire, and Zaffarini.
We'll hold there. Oh, the vote is 22-9. We're going to hold there.
I've got the suspension votes already.
Senator Huffman, you're recognized. Committee substitute for House Bill 2454. Suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. At this time, I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider the committee substitute to House Bill 2454. Members, a straw purchase occurs when the actual buyer of a firearm uses another person to execute the paperwork and buy a firearm on their behalf. The actual buyer uses another person because they cannot legally own or possess a firearm and therefore would not pass a background check. Although straw purchasing is illegal under federal law and punishable by up to 15 years, the federal government's inconsistent enforcement of the law leaves many of these crimes unaddressed. The committee substitute to House Bill 2454 creates the offense of knowingly acquiring a firearm for a person who is prohibited from possessing a firearm under state or federal law. The offense would be punishable as a state jail felony. Members, this is a heavily negotiated bill that will go a long way in preventing the illegal trafficking of firearms to those who are otherwise prohibited by law from possessing or owning a firearm. By simply mirroring the federal law against straw purchases in the Texas Penal Code, we will provide an important tool to law enforcement to prevent illegal gun trafficking in the state and also potentially avert future violent crimes. I move to suspend the regular order of business.
Senator West, what purpose?
Question of the author.
Do you yield?
Yes.
Well, Senator, I joined you in this bill. In fact, I filed a bill just like this, but I understand the heavy negotiated portions of it.
It was negotiated. Thank you, Senator.
And the reality is, as long as it gets done, it's not an issue who gets credit. It's something that needs to be done. We should have done it a long time ago. And I think you correctly said that even though we have a federal law, it has not been enforced in the state of Texas. And this provides law enforcement something they've been asking for a long time. Question.
Yes.
As relates to how this is operationalized by a law enforcement officer, and let's just say the two of us. You know that I'm not eligible. You may suspect that I'm not eligible to own a firearm.
Yes.
Is it incumbent upon you to do any type of background check if for some reason you as an individual want to sell a gun to me for due diligence purposes, reasonableness purposes?
I don't think that this bill speaks to what due diligence would have to be done. I think the requirement is simply that the person knowingly acts so that they, know what they're doing and they know the results of their action. So I think you would have to have the knowledge that the person was not legally under law permitted to obtain a firearm.
Right, and let's deal with the culpable mental state knowingly.
Okay.
And so the question in my mind is how, if you're selling me a gun, knowingly basically is substantially aware of the risk that it could in fact happen. Something, paraphrasing it a little bit.
Well, I assume you're talking about individual. You're not talking about federal firearms.
So I'm talking about the implementation of the law.
Required under the law, correct.
Right. And so from that vantage point, wouldn't a reasonable person, before they would turn around and sell a gun to another person, know what that person's background is and did that person doing a background check?
This bill does not require anyone to do a background check.
It does not require it. I understand
Correct.
that. But as a law enforcement officer, would that be something, given your past experiences in life, criminal justice experiences, would that not be something that you would want to look at to see whether or not the person did a background check before selling a gun to another person in order to make the case as a prosecutor?
I wouldn't make assumptions about what would be required in a specific case. I will only say that, a prosecutor or a police officer, in the case of a police officer, would have to have probable cause to believe that the individual, knowingly obtained a weapon for another person, knowing that they were not legally qualified to do it themselves.
Well, okay, and I understand. And obviously there are different ways, and all of us understand what the definition of probable cause is. And so if the officer is attempting to establish probable cause as part of that, they could look at whether or not there was a background check done by you as relates to me to determine probable cause. Is that correct? They could do that as a part of their investigation.
They could look at anything they wanted to look at that they had a legal reason or a search warrant to search, that they had a legal way to search. I would think most of these cases would be situations where, the evidence is very clear that an individual is not qualified, maybe where there's an undercover officer that's wired, something along those lines. I don't imagine that these are the easiest cases to prove, but there are certainly cases where the evidence would be clear that the individual acted knowingly in obtaining a firearm, knowing the person was not legally able to do it themselves.
Well, Judge, prosecutor, Senator, would you agree with me it would be probative evidence that a person had a background that showed that the person's not eligible to receive or handle or possess a firearm? Would that be probative?
I don't know if it would or not. I will simply say this bill does not require an individual to conduct a background check.
No, I agree with you. It does not require it.
Right.
I'm just asking you, would it be probative?
It might not.
Might not?
Just depends on the facts of the case.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Depends on the facts of the case.
Right.
So it might or might not be probative.
Well, it would depend on the value of the information received, the authenticity of the information. There are a lot of factors in these cases.
Sure, and I agree with you.
They have to be proved beyond a reasonable doubt before a person would be guilty of this offense.
And when I say probative, obviously, if it's law enforcement, they have access to the national crime computers and
Right.
all of that to make a determination as to whether or not a person has a criminal history, right?
Right. But an individual may not have that same access.
Right, but if law enforcement is investigating you in our scenario for selling me a weapon or providing me a weapon, then it would be law enforcement doing the investigation, and law enforcement would have the tools in order to do a background check to make a determination as to whether or not a person had a background.
A law enforcement officer can certainly do background checks, yes.
And as it relates to a citizen, could a citizen ask whether a background check could be done?
I think there are some portals where individuals can get information about other people's backgrounds. Some are not available, some are public databases.
That's exactly where I was getting ready to go. There are public databases that a person could you could say, well, I checked on a public database and Royce didn't have a background. And that would show that you've used due diligence to make a determination as to whether or not I was eligible.
Again, that would not be conclusive evidence because we don't know the correctness of databases. Some are better than others. Some are not, up to date. Some are not, not current entries. If it's a certified law enforcement officer who has ready access to the NCIC and up-to-date responses, that's probably pretty accurate. But what you might get on a website, I have no idea if that's accurate or not.
No, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. The fact is, though, that would show that a person exercised due diligence, though, in trying to make a determination.
Might do that, yes, in some cases, yeah.
Okay.
But it's not required.
It's not required, but again, it would exercise due diligence and determine whether the person had a background. Okay, well, again, I'm with you.
Good.
All right?
Thank you.
I wanted to make sure we
Appreciate
had this discussion.
Thank you.
And again, this is highly negotiated. Who negotiated the bill?
People who are interested in this issue.
Do you know of any people? Can you give us more specificity?
Law enforcement, the National Rifle Association, probably other groups that have interest in Second Amendment rights, and myself, my staff.
Any victims groups?
I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. Yeah.
So law enforcement, National Rifle Association.
Perhaps other groups that have interest in Second Amendment rights.
Second Amendment rights. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Senator Eckhart, what purpose?
To ask questions of the author.
Do you?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Huffman, thank you for this very much needed bill. My questions really go to a concern I think that I share with Senator West, his line of questions. My concern is for the enforceability. This would be a Class A misdemeanor for an individual to transfer a firearm to a person who is prohibited under state or federal law from having that firearm if they knew the person was prohibited.
It's actually a state jail felony.
Oh, even better. Very appropriate. So this sent me back to the penal code to look at the rest of the section.
Okay.
And I learned a lot from looking at the rest of the section because I wondered why I didn't have a whole lot of familiarity with cases under this section. So it's already an offense to transfer a weapon knowingly to a person who's prohibited from having it if you know it's going to be used in the commission of an unlawful act, or that the person who's receiving it is younger than 18, or you know that the person is intoxicated, or you know the person is convicted of a felony, or you know the person is under a protective order.
All right. So is that a question? Yes, that.
Well, I'm getting to the part that was curious to me, and it is outside your bill, but I think it goes to the enforceability of it. How will the person who's making the straw purchase and transferring it to the other individual know that the person they're transferring it to is prohibited from possessing it?
There are going to be specific cases where law enforcement who is investigating the case or the prosecutor who is prosecuting the case has a specific set of facts that
can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person knew that the individual was not legally qualified to obtain the firearm themselves under federal or state law. So they will be situations where that is able to be proven. There are going to be this type of situations where a person, for example, asks another person, I cannot buy the gun myself because, I have a felony conviction, or, I have a mental health adjudication, all the things that exist in federal or state law. And so would you buy this? Would you go into Walmart and fill out the forms and buy the gun for me? There are instances where this comes to the police attention. There are instances where police have gone to federal authorities, and because of too many cases, not enough prosecutors, for different reasons, the feds choose not to prosecute. This is another tool for law enforcement. Now a state prosecutor, if presented with facts that they believe they could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that such had occurred, they could prosecute the individual.
And I 100% agree with you. That would be such a tight case. If there was an admission by a party opponent, I am not eligible to possess a firearm, will you go buy this for me and hand it to me? That would be a straight up case under your law, and thank goodness for it.
That happens sometimes.
It does.
Yeah.
But since 1 in 5 purchases of guns are done without a background check in the state of Texas, what about Bob, who is clearly not, who knows he's not eligible to possess a firearm, goes to Jim and says, hey, purchase this firearm for me, or give me this firearm, transfer it over to me, and never tells Jim that he is prohibited from possessing a firearm. What obligation does Jim have to find out whether or not Bob is eligible to possess a firearm?
Again, a person who is licensed under the federal firearms sale and so forth has obligations. A citizen under current law does not have an obligation to run if you're asking about a background check, they don't have an obligation to run a background check.
Right, so anyone who is not a federal firearms dealer has no obligation to know that the person they're selling to is prohibited from possessing a firearm, correct?
We always hope that people exercise good judgment, but we can't legislate good judgment. So
we certainly don't require it. So let me ask you about this provision, which I thought was super curious, and it didn't occur to me before. Section 7 of the same provision of code, while prohibited from possessing a firearm under state or federal law, knowingly makes a materially false statement on a form that is required by state or federal law for the purchase, sale, or other transfer of a firearm, and submitted to a licensed firearm dealer as defined by 18 U.S.C. So that's a state jail felony. If you make a false statement when you know you're not supposed to have a gun and you are buying one from a federally licensed arms dealer. But it doesn't cover a private sale. So you can lie in a private sale.
I'm sorry, is that a question?
Well, it's curious to me because I really love your bill, but I'm concerned it's going to be very difficult to prosecute it, since a person who's prohibited from possessing a firearm has no obligation to tell the straw purchaser that they're prohibited. And the straw purchaser has no obligation to find out whether or not the person to whom they're transferring the gun is prohibited.
This law simply addresses the situation where the person transferring the gun knows the other person is not qualified to possess or purchase the gun on their own. It's very narrow, it's very simple. That's what this bill does.
So won't that only happen if the person who's transferring the gun is either a licensed dealer, has been told expressly by the person they're purchasing for that they are prohibited from possessing a gun, or 3, knows the person intimately enough to know that they have a protective order or a criminal history, et cetera, et cetera. So those would be the only circumstances in which we would ever get a conviction under this straw purchase.
I'm not going to speculate on the only situations where we might get a conviction under this particular law, because you're a former prosecutor, as you know. There are literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of fact scenarios. Just when you think you've heard it all, you haven't. And so I don't know what fact situations are going to arise. I do believe there will be some. I do believe this will be a tool. I do believe it will be a deterrent. And so that is why I'm presenting this bill on the floor today. That's why I'm doing this.
Wouldn't we narrow up that fact scenario and make it a lot easier to prosecute these straw man purchases if we simply required that they do a background check?
Senator, if that's the way you want to approach this bill, you can file a bill. But that's not what this bill does. The bill you have before you today is what I have laid out and explained to the members.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Of course,
I appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Senator Hinojosa, what purpose?
Well, Senator, yield for questions?
Yes,
you yield
of
to your
course.
neighbor.
Yes, to my friendly
Thank
neighbor.
you, Mr. President. I don't see this as a complicated bill about background checks or whether Bob asked Jim to buy a gun and they're adults. You got to use some common sense. But what really happens is, I know for a fact in Rio Grande Valley, you have some of the gang members with criminal records will ask a friend to buy 2 or 3 guns and ammunition. And the friend knows he's dealing with a gang member. And those kind of situations will need to give prosecutors the authority and another handle and another, as they say, tool in the box to be able to prosecute this type of cases. That's what we're focused on in this bill.
Exactly. And as you know, Senator Hinojosa, because I know you work in this field down in the Valley and you see a lot of this, I'm sure you would agree with me that many of the federal violations, that what could have been a federal violation, the federal prosecutors simply don't have the bandwidth to handle. And so this gives authority to the state prosecutors, state law enforcement to proceed if they come across a case like this, not have to go to the feds and try to deal with permission to prosecute. And so that's one of the reasons I'm doing that. And thanks for pointing that out.
And one more point. I think it's important to understand that what really happens in real life is that you have someone go ask who has a criminal conviction or is prohibited from owning a weapon, go to somebody else and pay him $100, pay him money to go buy a gun for him or her.
Exactly.
You ought to be suspicious of that. Wow, why am I going to go buy three guns, 4 guns, or AR-15, and I'm going to get paid for it, and I think, well, something is wrong with this problem.
Yeah, and part of that, again, the prosecutor would have to prove, but that's why I say there's so many fact situations. To your example, it's perfect. Someone comes and says, I'll give you $100 if you go buy me 10 guns, here's the money for the guns. That may raise a suspicion or may make a prosecutor look further into whether or not the person knowingly committed the act.
And this happens often, I know, in South Texas, so I know in the Valley, so I know it does happen in other parts of the state. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Menendez, what purpose?
Questions of the author?
Do you yield?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Huffman. And I also agree that I think you have a very good bill, and it's something that is a great step forward in the right direction. But I was listening to the exchange between you and Senator Hinojosa,
yes,
and it caught my attention because I think you agreed with him that the purpose of the bill is when someone, in his scenario, a young person has friends who are gang members, they know they're not eligible, they've broken the law, they go buy something for them. And that's what you're saying, that's what this is supposed to help capture, correct?
Correct.
So then the question that I have, though, is at what point does law enforcement know that the person who purchased the weapons and the ammunition for the person who's not eligible
how do they find out? At what point does the person buying the ammo turn themselves in? How does it work?
Well, it can happen in lots of ways. I mean, it could be a situation where the person who has, is illegally got the weapon and he does commit a crime, and then the police investigate. The person they arrest talks, and they actually tell him who bought the gun for him. It can be a snitch situation, or someone arrested who turns and evidence for the police. Right. It could be a parent, a concerned parent who an adult,
yes.
Who finds out that another kid went, an older, bought a gun for someone else. I mean, there's going to be all kind of fact situations, so it's hard for me to speculate. But I mean, usually it's going to be a situation, unfortunately, where someone uses the weapon in a illegal way, and so the police investigate, try to figure out where the gun came from. That's probably a big way that it would happen.
So would it be helpful if the person who was purchasing the ammunition or the long rifle or whatever it is, because in Texas, current law is that if you are under 21, you can purchase a long rifle, any kind of rifle, assault rifle, shotgun. You can purchase it that day. You can purchase ammunition, and then you can go deliver it wherever. Would it be helpful to have a waiting period for someone under 21?
Senator Menendez, that's not the topic of this bill. This bill really just deals with straw purchases where you have an individual who knowingly purchases a gun for another individual. It's not relevant to my bill at this point. Thank you, though, for that question.
I was just trying to figure if this would help us catch the people who are purchasing these weapons for people who illegally can't have them. And so trying to figure out how to make the law work a little better. But thank you for answering my question.
Thank you.
Senator Gutierrez, what purpose?
The gentlelady yield, Mr. President.
Do you yield?
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator. I too think this is a good bill. It actually does mirror federal law, as you just suggested, correct?
I'm sorry?
It does mirror federal law, as you just suggested, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And so if there was a incident, like a post-arrest incident, where someone was indeed investigating where a gun came from, federal authorities could prosecute in conjunction with state authorities, correct?
Yes.
Matter of fact, the federal statute goes a little bit more, though, right?
I don't want to say that authoritatively because I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have it in front of me, so I don't know if it's word for word.
The current bill, as written, says knowing. The federal statute says knowing or having reasonable cause to believe. So there's a reasonable person standard attributable to the federal statute.
So I would say the state law has a little stricter standard about proof than,
A little bit more expansive at the federal level.
That's how I would characterize it generally as a prosecutor, yes.
Briefly, do you think criminals act rationally?
Do I think criminals act rationally? No.
I don't either. Your bill, what does it do?
What does it do? It prevents an individual who knows that another person is not legally qualified to purchase or possess a firearm under state or federal law from doing it for them. And if they do it knowingly, then it is a state jail felony.
Is it fair to say, to summarize, that it bans the sale of or acquisition of a firearm to a person that the seller knows can't legally purchase firearms?
I wouldn't use the word bans, but it prohibits behavior that would include purchasing a weapon for an individual they know is not qualified to purchase a weapon themselves.
Granted, I agree. Prohibits, fair enough. Does this apply to long guns and handguns alike?
It applies to firearms.
Okay, all firearms?
Yes.
Including assault-style rifles?
Any firearm under the definition of Texas Penal Code.
So in essence, this bill limits who can purchase or acquire any firearm under your set of facts?
I don't think it does that. I think it provides a criminal penalties for individuals who knowingly purchase a weapon or provide a weapon to an individual that they know cannot possess the weapon under state or federal law.
Pretty standard. You suggested that the NRA was here and they were part of the stakeholder groups.
I believe that they were. I don't want to say here. I don't know if it was in the Capitol.
We are all very busy. You are busier than most. Respectfully, colleagues. You're busier than most as the finance chair. You're doing the budget. Did you see the representative from the NRA?
I did not.
Probably your staff and others helped to formulate and come up with this idea.
I don't know. This bill was sent to me by a House member, and I was asked to carry it. It was my pleasure to do so.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
my staff confirmed that the bill was negotiated, and it was a bill that was ready to move forward in the Texas Senate.
2 days ago, it struck me. The elevator was closing, and I saw the NRA's expert here in the building. His name is John Lott. Is that a name that you know might have been one of the negotiators for the NRA?
I do not know that gentleman.
John Lott suggests that more guns equals less crime. Are you aware of that?
That's a statement by a Mr. Lott? No, I did not know that.
Do you agree with that statement? More guns equal less crime?
Sir, I'm not here to debate like criminology with you. I'm here to debate this bill, which provides a criminal penalty, as I said before, for individuals who knowingly assist another to possess a weapon that they are not legally qualified to possess.
All right.
Or purchase.
Senator, Madam Chair, thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator.
Secretary, any objection on the suspension of the rules? Hearing none. Chair lays out committee substitute for House Bill 2454 on second reading. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute House Bill 2454 relating to the unlawful acquisition of certain weapons.
Following amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Menendez.
Senator Menendez, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I mentioned earlier to Senator Huffman that I very much am in support of her bill, because I think these are the sorts of measures we should be taking to prevent firearms from getting into the hands of bad actors and criminals. And I think we need to be taking these measures because of the tremendous loss we've had. 16,000 people already this year to gun violence, over 221 mass shootings, all before we've even made it to the half-year mark. And if you think about it, think about the tragedies we've had: Uvalde, Santa Fe, Allen. You know, we don't want to forget anyone, but the sad part is we all know this list is very long. So what we want is to stop it from growing. And I know that we can't guarantee that it's not going to happen again, but just like we've been relentless in trying to eliminate other issues, whether it be voter fraud, child exposure to adult content, we need to be as relentless in preventing another mass shooting. Because just as we've gone over and over how we can never get innocence back, lives back, we can see the patterns that have an understanding, and that many of these acts of mass violence and suicide come from people suffering from serious mental health disturbances at times, and the weapons and the ammunition that are bought many times right before the criminal acts are committed. This has been especially true for people who are under the age of 21, who have been, in many cases, the main perpetrators of mass shootings. This does not get any time. The bill doesn't give us time for life-saving intervention. If we'll be lucky, the bill will help us stop before a violent event. And what this amendment to House Bill 2454 does, it gives law enforcement and Texans a little bit of time. I want to add a 30-day waiting period for any individuals under the age of 21. Because, members, it's been said on this floor recently that we don't trust minors with alcohol. We know that alcohol purchase is 21. Cigarettes. And I may know that it may be a little much to say a month, and I'm willing to negotiate on that. But we don't even trust people to rent a car until they're 25. Members, an overwhelming majority of Texans support this, and I think that if we're going to have a conversation on the floor about harmful firearm distribution, it is appropriate that we have this and that we consider this amendment. And let me tell you that we have a defensive prosecution in the bill. If the person's a peace officer, not a problem, no waiting period. If the person's a member of the armed forces or the state military forces, not a problem. You don't have to wait. But members, we just heard Senator Hinojosa and Senator Huffman talking about that young person who might be affiliated or know a friend of a gang member who goes to buy the weapon for the gang members. And I asked Senator Huffman, well, how will law enforcement know? They need time. And all I'm saying is if you're under 21, that we have a waiting period. I do not want to do anything to harm this bill. I want to give this bill an additional helpful tool to make it more useful. And I think that this amendment does that. And with that, Mr. President, I'd like to move adoption of floor amendment number 1. I want y'all to know I have not surprised Senator Huffman. My staff and her staff have been talking since Friday. I've spoken to her directly, and she has been very gracious. And she's explained to me what she told all of us, that her bill is heavily negotiated. So I won't be surprised at all if she says that she can't accept it. But I still had to try because I really do think that is the best policy. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hughes, what purpose?
Mr. President, thank you. Respectfully, I raise a point of order against further consideration of the amendment. It's not germane to the bill under Rule 7.15, Senate Rules.
Please bring it forward. Senator Menendez.
Mr. President, after the discussion with the parliamentarian and in order to make sure that we don't in any way create a point of order for the bill itself, I'm going to go ahead and pull the amendment down, sir.
The amendment is pulled down. Members, there is an amendment. We'll let it get all the way to the back. That's why we want to give you a chance to read it, Senator Springer. Give him a chance, Senator Eckhart, to look at the amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 2 by Eckhart.
You're recognized on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Although this amendment is long, it's nothing that you have not seen before. This bill was filed with regard to emergency protective orders, or also known as red flag protective orders. Under the very, very good bill of Senator Huffman's, it's under 4606 of the Penal Code, the provision right before the new language from her bill prohibits the transfer of a weapon to an individual who has an active protective order. What this amendment does is expand protective order to include emergency, extreme risk protective orders, otherwise known as red flag protective orders. It's modeled on the same civil procedure for a protective order in a family violence case. Extreme risk protective orders, they involve a court hearing, clearly defined due process protections. Requirements must include substantial evidence of potential lethal harm before the civil court judge can order one. Extreme risk protective orders are in place for a limited period of time and then they automatically expire. But the subject of an extreme risk protective order, just like the subject of a domestic violence protective order, can argue against the protective order and even come back on the protective order saying that it should be extinguished early because the threat has passed, at which point the firearms would be returned to the possession of the individual. So while this amendment is long, it is nothing you haven't seen before. It is modeled exactly on the domestic violence protective order, but it is for extreme risk or red flag. In many instances of gun violence, family members or friends notice warning signs that shooters were at risk of harming themselves or others. This gives them an avenue to prevent those firearms from getting into their hands.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hughes, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. President. I respectfully raise a point of order under Rule 7.15 of the Senate rules, and the amendment is not germane to the purpose of the bill.
Bring your point of order forward, please. Senator Eckhart.
While I feel strongly that this amendment does not change the subject of this bill, it does expand the prohibitions to which the subject of the bill would apply. I will pull down the amendment.
Members, the amendment is pulled down. The following amendment, Secretary, read the amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 3 by Eckhart.
Senator Eckhart, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment goes directly to much of the questions to the author with regard to its enforceability. Without having a standard of due diligence, meeting the knowing mens rea in a criminal offense of straw man purchase is going to be difficult. As Senator Gutierrez pointed out, the federal straw man prohibition has both knowing and reasonably should have known. An easier standard to meet than just knowing. So this amendment requires a background check by the individual who's making the straw man purchase. We heard in the questions from Senator West, as well as my questions, Senator Gutierrez's questions, Senator Menendez's questions, concern that this very good bill would not result in prosecutions unless there was, and this is appropriate under criminal law, unless there is beyond a reasonable doubt that the individual who made the straw purchase knew that the person to whom they were transferring was prohibited from having the weapon. If we require a background check, it will be very easy to prove that they knew. Also, it's arguable that by requiring the background check, the straw purchase will never occur. So I offer this amendment to the bill, and I hope you will support it.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hughes, what purpose?
Mr. President, again, the bill about unlawful acquisition, clearly the purpose, I must again raise a point of order against further consideration of this amendment in that it violates germaneness, Senate Rule 7.15.
Please bring your point of order up. Be better to approach, since a point of order was called, and do it here. That's what we normally do. We don't have many of these, but when we do, that's how we do it. Senator Eckhart.
While I believe that without a background check requirement, it is unlikely we will see very many prosecutions under this bill because the knowing standard will be difficult to meet under our current law, I will pull down the amendment.
Members, the amendment is pulled down. There's an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 4 by Gutierrez.
Senator Gutierrez on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. My amendment creates the unlawful acquisition of a firearm by an 18, 19, or 20-year-old, specifically assault rifles. It does, however, establish some exceptions under what was passed in the House committee not too long ago, which it allows for hunting, it allows for a transfer to a peace officer or someone serving in the military or who's honorably discharged in the military. It allows for people utilizing these guns in a firing range and so on, and for the purpose of lawful hunting, as long as that they are on such a type hunting facility. And so with that, this is about the lawful acquisition of these types of weapons to 18, 19, and 20-year-olds.
Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, again, on inspection of the amendment, even based on the layout, I must raise a point of order against further consideration in that the amendment is not germane to the bill under Senate Rule 7.15.
Please bring your point of order forward. Members, the point of order is well taken and sustained. Yes, I'm sorry, what purpose?
Respectfully, Mr. President, under Rule 515, I would like to appeal the ruling of the chair to the body.
Would you bring your, Senator Hughes, what purpose?
Well, Mr. President, at the appropriate time, I will move to table the motion to appeal the ruling of the chair.
Okay. It's appropriate now.
Mr. President, I move to table the appeal of the ruling of the chair.
Would you like to close on the appeal, the tabling?
President, this is a privileged motion. There is no motions to table on Rule 515.
It is always in order to table an appeal in the parliamentary rules. Is his mic working, please? Turn it on. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. President. Respectfully, may we see that rule? I mean, I'm trying to find the rule or the precedent for that, because it's our understanding that under Rule 515, that every question of order shall be in the first instance be decided by the President, from whose decision any member may appeal to the Senate. Rulings which set or alter precedent shall be printed as an annotation to the rules. The rule is quite clear, Mr. President. When a member, any member in this room, disagrees with the decision of the chair, then the body can then affirm or controvert that decision.
Hold on 1 second, Senator. Senator Gutierrez, it is in order to table an appeal. You are now recognized to close, if you wish, on your appeal.
Mr. President, I respectfully disagree, Mr. President. I want to be very respectful to you. I respectfully disagree with that. I will read the editorial notes in my closing, Mr. President.
Senator, you have an opportunity to close on the tabling on your appeal. That's what you, on your appeal.
On the appeal of the germaneness ruling.
Yeah, of the germaneness ruling.
On the germaneness ruling. In other words, you are allowing the argument for the germaneness. Is that what we're suggesting here?
That is what an appeal is.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Members, we have a germaneness rule. In the germaneness rule, it's very clear that it doesn't require that bills be that amendments be exactly word for word as the bills. And in this instance, otherwise we wouldn't have any amendments anywhere. Anywhere. Not in the House, not in the Senate. We can't have an expectation that amendments should be the same as the bills. We heard from two previous amendments that had been offered up that indeed expanded, created other types of vehicles of regulation. This particular amendment, my amendment, was very clear. As we heard from Senator Hughes arguing against the previous amendments, he says this bill is about unlawful restriction, unlawful acquisition. The very words by Senator Milton when he was helping argue, restricting by individuals, that's what this bill does. My amendment simply was a subset of unlawful acquisition to 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. To 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. It didn't expand the bill in any other regulatory function. The bill is about unlawful acquisition of firearms. And my amendment is about unlawful acquisition of firearms. These are the rules that are in place in our books. We indeed had precedent. I offered precedent to the chair and the parliamentarian, and that precedent was from the 86th session, where Senator Hughes had a bill that was a broader bill about religious beliefs, offered an amendment that narrowed to religious organizations, a subset of the greater bill. Point of order was raised in the 86th on that particular amendment by Senator Menendez. His point of order was overruled. The amendment was allowed to go on. We are simply staying within the principle of unlawful acquisition of firearms. This amendment is simply about creating a subset of unlawful acquisition of firearms. We don't need to get into the horrors of Uvalde or Allen, Texas, or anything else. We're talking about the rules, and we're talking about precedent. We have plenty of time to talk about those other things later. So with that, members, I would ask your consideration to uphold the rules of this body, to uphold the rules of precedent, so that we may be able to offer amendments in this building and in this side of this building from here forward. Thank you, Mr.
Members, the question is on the motion to table the appeal. Secretary will call the roll.
I can't see. Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, King, Colcourse, Lamantia, Menendez, Middleton, Miles, Nichols, Parker, Paxton, Perry, Schwertner, Sparks, Springer, West, Whitmire, Zaffarini.
Members, 27 yes votes, 4 no votes. The motion to table prevails. Senator Huffman, you're recognized. Passage to third reading.
I move passage to third reading on the committee substitute to House Bill 2454.
Okay. Any objection? Hearing none. Bill passed to third reading. You're now recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell,
31 ayes, no nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage committee substitute for House Bill 2454. Did you wish to speak now, Senator Gutierrez? No. We're on final right now. Now would Secretary read the caption.
Committee substitute House Bill 2454 relating to the unlawful acquisition of certain weapons.
Chair recognizes Senator Gutierrez to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is a good piece of legislation. The problem is that it mirrors federal law. And so I think that that's always a good thing when we're doing that. The federal law is actually a bit more expansive. It allows for a reasonable, prudent standard. Gives us more opportunity to stop people that shouldn't have weapons of this type. It's probably the last opportunity that we're going to have to be able to do anything in this building that would make it a little harder for people to access militarized weapons or weapons of any kind. I have shed a few tears with you privately. I've shed a few tears in this room. shed some tears in the Lieutenant Governor's office. Next week, we'll memorialize these children that passed on. But I think that we're missing a real opportunity to be more expansive here without infringing on anybody's rights. We have to be able to regulate the guns that are killing people indiscriminately. And it is the guns. I know people say it's people. But take the guns away to some level. Take them from people that are mentally ill, like the young man in Allen, Texas. Minors, like the young man in Uvalde. We have opportunities to do things that are responsible in here. And we've abrogated our responsibilities because a few people on the far right want to tell us that we're infringing on their constitutional rights. I'm a gun owner. I own 9 weapons. I've acquired them all legally. When you go to a gun show, I don't know how many of you have actually been to a gun show. You have federally licensed dealers, and you have what are called traders or hobbyists. There's one ATF agent there sometimes. He's going around talking to those hobbyists. He asks the hobbyists, well, are you making money on this? They say, no, I'm just a trader. I don't make money on this. That's all he's got to ask. The hobbyist, when someone goes up to him to buy the AR-15, says, hello, Mr. Purchaser, how are you? I want to buy this AR-15. Okay. He only has to ask 2 questions. Are you a U.S. citizen? And have you ever been convicted of a felony? That's it. No driver's license is exhibited. Nothing. There are more weapons bought at gun shows, weapons that are ending up in Mexico in the hands of cartels. 40% of the AR-15s made yearly in the United States end up in the hands of Mexican cartels. What are we doing? I don't understand this anymore. You shouldn't be fearful of irrational people. I agree with Senator Kolkhorst when she says that criminals act irrationally. John Lott, their so-called expert that was here 2 days ago with the NRA, he also argued in the House bill. John Lott wrote a book. More crimes equal less guns. That's his title of his book. More guns equals less crime. He wrote that, and with that, he became the NRA's lead expert. This is what he wrote. This is his conclusion. My conclusion is that criminals as a group tend to behave rationally. When crime becomes more difficult, less crime is committed. We haven't done anything session after session to make crime more difficult. Yeah, we've enhanced some bills. Someone filed a 10-year minimum. The Lieutenant Governor suggested 10-year minimum. Great idea. We passed that bill, I think, out of this building. I don't know who it was. Senator Hughes, perhaps. I don't know. Out of this side of the building. You presume that criminals act rationally. They don't. The first part of my career, I was a criminal defense lawyer. I've been a lawyer now for 23 years. I did that for 12. Went to trial. Senator, she was a judge presiding over criminal cases. And she just told you criminals don't act rationally. They don't. And we presuppose that by creating pieces of legislation that are going to be enhanceable type offenses, that somehow that's going to prevent those people from doing this thing. Oh, hell, the legislature just passed a bill, and I'm going to have a 10-year minimum if I take this gun into that grocery store and rob them. They don't think that. John Lott, the leading expert for the NRA, he's absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. And we have spread guns so much into the hands of young people, in the hands of people that are irresponsible in their storage. In March, a 3-year-old shoots her 4-year-old sister to death in Houston. Just yesterday, a 3-year-old shoots her 1-year-old sister in Houston because parents didn't safeguard the damn guns. Thank God the 1-year-old lived. He lived yesterday. 2 months ago, that little 3-year-old is never, ever going to be the same again. Never. I need to apologize to all of you. I need to apologize to the Lieutenant Governor, because I started out, I tried to be nice, and then I got angrier and angrier, and I've been angry for a long time. I've been angry for a long time. I've been angry because I saw everything that the Department of Public Safety gave me in a hard drive this big. And I had to see it because there was tremendous failure. As Steve McCraw suggested, it was abject failure. 2 terabytes of information. I needed to see the failure, but what I saw was a lot of failure. And what I saw was little children with no faces. What I saw was bodies just riddled. Blood everywhere. 3 piles of kids. 2 of them with teachers draped over them in one room. Kids in another room, piled together, because that's what we train them to do. We train them to go huddle together. I know you think that we have done some good things on school hardening, and we have. The senator, the chairwoman, has passed a good piece of legislation, hopefully in a few minutes. But it is hardly enough. We don't get to pat on ourselves on the back for mirroring federal legislation. That isn't enough. I'm going to stay angry for a long time. You haven't seen what I've seen. I urge you to sign a non-disclosure agreement if you think you can live with it. But you too can get 2 terabytes of information. I urge you to look at all the videos. I urge you to hear the officers throwing up as they take down that gunman and see the scene a few minutes later. You've never seen so much blood in your life. You have to tell those fringe people in your party that they are wrong. That she didn't infringe on their gun access. Someday you're going to have to tell them that there is no way in hell mentally ill people should have these things. You're going to have to tell them that you have to have some restrictions on people on how they access these weapons. You're even going to have to tell them that an 18-year-old shouldn't be able to buy an AR-15 like he's buying soda pop at 7-Eleven. I sure am sorry to all of you the way that I've behaved this session. I am angry as hell. And I see these kids when I go to bed at night. I see them in the morning when I wake up. Their parents are all my friends. I see them on Facebook. And I see them when they're alive on Facebook, laughing, enjoying life, and hoping, like all kids hope. I'll close with this. We have to do this and more, a hell of a lot more. When you're a young man in your 30s and 40s, you think, man, you got the world by them. You know what? And you think, man, I want to do all these things, and you're ambitious. And you want to just do great things. Then you become a parent. And your ambition changes a little bit. And your ambition, your hope, turns into a hope for your children. What they're going to do and what they're going to become. For these families, all that hope is gone. It's just lost. All these people argue here every day, every week they were here. I didn't get them here. It wasn't me coming having them knock on your door. It's all they had left. To be able to come to you and advocate so that this wouldn't happen again. Anybody else's kids. Of course, we know it has. It happened 2 weeks ago. So I get what you guys have to deal with back home, and I get that you have to go and run for office. Sometimes you just got to tell those people to go to hell. And you're here to protect kids. And that's all that matters. That's all that matters. So, Mr. President, thank you for the time, and I do apologize to you. My behavior. I do apologize.
Senator, no apologies necessary, but I appreciate it. I know that this has struck you very hard. We talked about that in our office at the beginning of session. Give you as much leeway as we can to deal with it. Senator Huffman, you are recognized on final.
Thank you. Members, I move final passage of the committee substitute to House Bill 2454.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes and no nays. The bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Following bills on first reading and reference to committee. Secretary will read the bills and resolution. We're going to be wrapping up very quickly, members.
House Bill 1598, Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs. House Bill 3686 to Criminal Justice.
Senator Perry.
Mr. President and members, I move to suspend the 24-hour posting rule in accordance with Senate Bills Rules 1110 and 1118 so the Senate Committee on Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs can add the following bills to the agenda for tomorrow, Friday, May 19th, 2023 at 7:30 a.m. in the room E1012. Following bills are to be added: HB 4659, House Member Schofield, author, Senate Sponsor Betancourt; House Bill 1598, author Representative Darby, Senate Sponsor Charles Perry. Mr. President and members, if there are no other questions, I move suspension.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is adopted. Senator Swertner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the 24-hour posting rule in accordance with Senate Rule 11.10 and 11.18 so that the Senate Committee on Business and Commerce can meet at 8 a.m. on Friday, May 19th, rather than 8:30 in E1.036. In addition, I would like to add the following bills: HB 30, relating to access to certain law enforcement, corrections, and prosecutorial records under the Public Information Law; HB 1437, relating to an appraisal procedure for disputed losses under personal automobile insurance policies; and HB 1518, relating to the examination of appraisal services for an appraisal management company; and HB 3033, relating to a public information law. Mr. President, members, if there are no further questions, I move suspension of the motion.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion
Mr. President.
adopted. Yes.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Business and Commerce will reconvene 15 minutes upon adjournment E1.012 tonight. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Whitmire.
Mr. President, I'd like to move to suspend the 24-hour posting rule in accordance with Senate Rules 11.10 and 11.18 so that the Senate Criminal Justice Committee can move up our starting time from 8:30 to 8 a.m. tomorrow, Friday, May 18th. And I'll say that again, we're going to start at 8 in the morning instead of our normal 8:30. Senator Betancourt, expect you to be there on time. And I also ask that we suspend to add the following bills: House Bill 2523, House Bill 2600, House Bill 2741, House Bill 3686. I move suspension.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is adopted. Senator Colcourse.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the 24-hour posting rule in accordance with Senate Rules 11.10 and 11.18 so that the Committee on Health and Human Services can meet at 8 a.m. tomorrow, May 19th, in the Senate chamber to take up pending business as well as the following bills: House Bill 1105, House Bill 3329, House Bill 1998, House Bill 2414, House Bill 2512, and House Bill 1357.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is adopted. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the 24-hour posting rule and all necessary rules to allow the Senate Committee on State Affairs to consider the following bills at its hearing, which will resume upon adjournment this evening in the chamber. The following bills to be added are House Bill 824, House Bill 3058, House Bill 2850, and Senate Bill 2633. That's my motion.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is adopted. Senator Birdwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, the Committee on Border Security will reconvene at 2100 or 09 this evening for after adjournment in room E1016 to continue our border security hearing and complete our hearing with 4 bills that we'll need to vote on this evening. So thank you, Mr. President and members.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Betancourt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the 24-hour posting rule in accordance with Senate Rules 11.10, 11.18, so the Senate Committee on Local Government can hold the following bills to the agenda for our meeting tomorrow, Friday, May 19th, 9 a.m. or upon adjournment, recess in the Extension Auditorium E1.004. House Bill 191 by Representative Bernal, sponsor Senator Hughes. House Bill 581, Representative Raymond, sponsor Senator Zaffarini. House Bill 783, Representative Mesa, sponsor Senator West. House Bill 1228, Representative Metcalf, sponsor Senator Springer. House Bill 1248, Representative Gillian, sponsor Senator Paxton. House Bill 2181 by Representative Rose, sponsor Senator West. House Bill 2533, Representative Wally, sponsor Senator Zaffarini. House Bill 2816, Representative John. House Bill, sponsor Senator Creighton. House Bill 3207, Representative Murr, sponsor Senator Springer. House Bill 3191, Representative Spiller, sponsor Senator Springer. House Bill 3364 by Representative Button, sponsor Senator Betancourt. House Bill 3848, Representative Bell, Cecil, sponsor Senator Creighton. House Bill 4082 by Representative Goldman, sponsor Senator Betancourt. House Bill 4158, Representative Schofield, sponsor Senator Betancourt. House Bill 4227 by Representative Goldman, sponsor Senator Hancock. House Bill 4456, Representative Harris, sponsor Senator Betancourt. House Bill 4645, Representative Flores, sponsor Senator Zaffarini. House Bill 5405, Representative Raymond, sponsor Senator Zaffarini. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Are you doing this for the entire Senate chamber here? You're hearing everyone's bills, huh?
That's right. I am a river to my people in the Senate as the local government chair.
All
Mr.
the
President.
members in the House appreciate that.
Yes.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. Senator Hughes, did you need another comment?
Thank you, Mr. President. Having previously moved suspension had been granted by the Senate, I will just announce the Senate Committee on State Affairs will resume its hearing, which began this morning. We'll resume it upon final adjournment or final recess here in the Senate chamber as soon as the tables are set up. That's my announcement. Thank you.
Senator Colcourse.
Thank you, Mr. President. In my listing and suspension of suspending rules, Senate Rule 1110 and 1118, so that the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services can meet tomorrow at 8 a.m. on May 19th in the Senate chamber. I would like to add one more bill to that list, and that's HB 617. HB 617.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is adopted. The chair announces the signing of the following of the Presidents of the Senate.
HJR 134, House Bill 1959, House Bill 1859, House Bill 1789, House Bill 1285, House Bill 1225, House Bill 1040, House Bill 260, House Bill 219, House Bill 162, SJR 87, SB 2289, Senate Bill 2010, Senate Bill 1932, Senate Bill 1447, Senate Bill 1364, Senate Bill 1361, Senate Bill 1340, Senate Bill 1089, Senate Bill 786, Senate Bill 538, Senate Bill 246, Senate Bill 500, Senate Bill 14, Senate Bill 2186, Senate Bill 2538, Senate Bill 2592, Senate Bill 594, Senate Bill 728, Senate Bill 798, Senate Bill 801, Senate Bill 821, Senate Bill 849, Senate Bill 1076, Senate Bill 1133, Senate Bill 1179, Senate Bill 1238, Senate Bill 1250, Senate Bill 1420, Senate Bill 1424, Senate Bill 1794, Senate Bill 1860, Senate Bill 2102.
Members, can you just take your seats? I know everyone is ready to go to work for a moment. We have a memorial resolution. Senator Betancourt, what purpose?
Yes, I just want to remind everyone that we have a local government meeting starting at approximately 9:07 to hear posted business and in the Extension Auditorium E1.004.
Okay. Members, can you please take your seats for memorial resolution? Chair recognizes the Dean of the Senate for a highly privileged motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. This time I'll yield to our colleague, Senator Middleton.
Senator Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, today is May the 18th, the 5th anniversary of the Santa Fe shooting, and I'd like to pause for a moment of silence here tonight for the 10 victims: Cynthia Tisdale, Ann Perkins, Jared Black, Shanna Fisher, Christian Garcia, Aaron McLeod, Angelique Ramirez, Sabika Sheik, Christopher Stone, and Kimberly Vaughn. If you could please join me in lifting the family up in prayers today and for a moment of silence.
Thank you, Senator Middleton. Senator Whitmire.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, I move that the Senate adjourn until 11 a.m. Friday, May 19th, in memory of the 10 victims that Senator Middleton just enumerated for us. We do so in their memory.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The Senate stands adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow. We moved it back an hour so the committees can meet to get bills out of committee because we needed that extra time today. So 11 tomorrow morning, Friday, May 19th. Thank you, members. I know it's been a very long day, and I want to thank all the ladies up here who never get a break. So thank you to everyone up in the front. Thank you, members.